So let's talk a little bit about how Congress has changed with Republican control, because Republicans have made a number of changes in the way that Congress is run. And one sort of general question I want to ask you is, you were quoted the other day, I saw you actually say this, as saying that Republicans have changed the culture of this town, Washington. What do you mean by that?
I'm very proud of that. If I have a legacy, that's it. Well, first of all, the culture of the Congress. When I came here, it was all about liberal politics. All you got was liberal bills on the floor of the House or the Senate. Everything started from the left and moved to the center. Now, after 12 years of Republican majority, everything starts from the right and moves to the center. That's a total change of culture. You don't, 20 years ago, people like me and Newt Gingrich and Dick Armey and others were laughed at as right-wing crazies. Today, the right is, other than with liberal media, the right is accepted in this town as legitimate and accepted as a force to be reckoned with. And everything starts from any discussion in this town always starts with the conservatives or the conservative point of view first. Secondly, we changed the culture of what's called K Street, of which I'm very proud. We built one of the largest political coalitions that I've seen in my lifetime. Remember, K Street was controlled by the Democrats as Congress was controlled by the Democrats for 50 years. So the lobbyists in this town were all Democrats, by and large. They'd hired Republican here and there, but the people who ran the lobby shops of this town or the associations were all Democrats. Well, that's no longer true. The vast majority of K Street is run by Republicans.
And you
that changes
take credit
the culture,
for that, right?
Absolutely. I'm very proud of it.
How'd you make that happen?
We developed a strategy called the K Street Strategy, and we encouraged people to hire Republicans. And when jobs came open, and we also would recruit people that could fill these jobs, some of them from our staff, some others from outside, people that we knew. And we would make suggestions and recommendations to the people that were doing the hiring to hire Republicans.
Lobbyists are seen in the minds of the public as people who represent financial interests, the interests of companies, the interests of businesses. So why is it important to have those lobbyists be Republicans?
Well, first of all, lobbyists are, you're correct, and lobbyists represent interests, not just business interests. There are lobbyists for the Sierra Club, there are lobbyists for Common Cause, there are lobbyists for ACLU, there are lobbyists for every leftist organization, including the Trial Lawyers Association. There are lobbyists that are hired for leftist organizations and Democrat organizations, as there are lobbyists that are hired for conservative organizations and people that support our point of view, pro-business organizations. The reason that we are tainted, if you would, with having changed K Street is the people that are the losers, the Democrats and the left, hate it, that we're the winners. And so they make it sound like, I look at it as lobbyists are people that support our point of view. Lobbyists that we support are people that support our point of view, our political agenda, and help us accomplish it. There is no way in this world, as big as this country is or how complex this Congress is, that you can just send a congressman up to Washington and have him accomplish all the things that need to be accomplished. You have to have organizations, you have to have people, you have to have the people of the United States coming together through organizations to convince the American mindset that we need to be moving in that direction. And frankly, we were very good at it.
Well, and again, it's been widely reported that you involved the lobbyists who support your general political philosophy in the writing of legislation that might affect their very industries.
As do the Democrats. They have the trial lawyers in, they have the union members in, writing their legislation, consulting with them. It's part of how you get legislation done and people on board to support that legislation to make it happen. The Democrats have the same people, same kind of people coming in and helping them with their legislative agenda too.
There's been some talk this year about something called lobbying reform that would be rules having to do with travel and relationships with lobbyists and so forth, which doesn't seem to be going anywhere, at least in this Congress. Do you think the public even cares about that?
No, they don't. The public in general has a low opinion, and always have had a low opinion of politicians, except their own. They think, I mean, we're just above lawyers and car salesmen on the scale of how you feel about people. But everybody loves their own congressman and their own representative or the person they voted for. But the things that are going on, inside the Beltway, as it said, minutia, the average citizen out there doesn't care about that. They want a good representative. They want to see things happening. Hopefully they want to see what we're doing as accomplished, and hopefully we're making them happy about that because they keep returning us as the majority.
Let's go back to the way, some of the changes that have been made in the way that Congress is run under the Republican majority. Speaker Hastert has implemented a policy from time to time on major pieces of legislation, which calls for getting the vote of the majority of the majority. In other words, the majority of Republicans, not just the majority of the House. What is the theory behind that?
It's not a theory. It's a way that you survive on very small margins. We've never had more than, I think, a 17-vote margin. Democrats enjoyed 30-vote margins, 40-vote margins, 80-vote margins. We haven't had that luxury. So when you have those smaller margins, I instituted as whip what was called grow the vote, which means it takes a lot more work, but what you do is you have your agenda set out and then you work on issues early on so that as you work your way towards the floor of the House, problems are worked out before you get to the floor. I know Speaker Hastert doesn't have a rule that says a majority of the majority. What he does have is that he's not going to bring anything to the floor that the Republican conference would rebel against. He's not going to bring to the floor a bill that has all the Democrats and a few Republicans. You might as well turn over the floor to the Democrats and say, have it. He's going to bring, as he has in the 8 years that he's been Speaker, much longer than most, certainly the longest serving Republican Speaker, he understood that in order to keep these small margins together and keep the Republican conference together, we had to move together. And we couldn't do anything to drive wedges through the middle of the conference, or he would lose his ability to drive an agenda.
Why do you think that the number of moderate Republicans who call themselves moderate, is shrinking? And is that a good thing?
I don't know that it's a good thing. I think the reason it's shrinking is the House is incredibly. It is a House of Representatives. It's very representative of where the country is. And I believe that the country is very polarized, particularly on issues. There's very little middle ground on many issues that are important issues that need federal focus. So I think that's what you're seeing in the House of Representatives is what's being reflected in the nation. And you're having, now, I do qualify that a little bit with the Democrat Party. I think the Democrat Party, in the House at least, has allowed the most liberal of their members to be their leaders, and that is moving their party more and more to the left. And so as the nation is polarized, so is the House of Representatives.
I think one could also say that the Republican leaders are on the conservative end of the scale, are they not?
Sure, absolutely.
So
But when you're in the majority, you have to consider everybody. When you're in the minority, you don't have to consider anybody. And so the minority is becoming more and more shrill and moving more and more to the left.
do you think that polarization is a good thing or a bad thing?
I think partisanship is a good thing. Polarization leads you to believe that people are so mad at each other that they don't debate. I think what the country is going through is a debate on the direction and the future of the United States of America, whether it be in foreign policy or economic policy or cultural policy. There's a huge debate going on in this country. That debate's been going on for nigh on 25 years. I've lived through that debate and that transition of Democrat dominance to Republican dominance. We're just not there as, when the Republicans are not as dominant as the Democrats got to be. But I think that's good. It's a healthy, as long as it stays a healthy debate about the issues, and I think I cringe at the politics of personal destruction. I think we ought to keep it above all of that and stay on the issues and argue over principles, and if we do that, then I think the polarization and the partisanship is very beneficial for the future of this country.
I guess I just have to respond by remembering that certainly Clinton said he was a victim of the politics of personal destruction, because there were dozens and dozens of hearings into everything large and small that happened within the executive branch while he was president, and things were said about his personal behavior. Would you say that the ongoing criticism to investigation to impeachment of President Clinton had any component of the politics of personal destruction?
Yeah, I think it did, to a certain extent. I don't think he was the victim. I think he was the victim of his own personal destruction, as far as his personal character and his personal habits. But the system is set up so that when you have one party in the White House and the other party in the Congress, there's going to be a lot more oversight than you normally have, because you don't have, like we have now, where you have the Republicans in the executive branch and the Republicans in the congressional legislative branch, where they work together all the time. You don't need the hearings when you can call up the president and say, why is this being done? Show me why it's being done, and you can get it done, get your answers. You call up the opposite party, they're not going to give you answers. So you've got to have hearings, and you've got to have subpoenas, and you've got to have oversight. So it is a different process when you think about it that way.
Well, and I want to ask you about that, but I want to continue on for a moment on this idea about partisanship and whether it's good or bad. And you made a very fiery speech in your farewell speech on the floor of the House of Representatives, in which you criticized people who might try to be statesmen or make themselves statesmen by seeking to compromise whenever possible. Is compromise generally not a good idea?
No, compromise is a necessity, but you don't start with compromise. I like to think that for the 12 years I was in leadership, we started from the right and worked our way to the center. And then you passed a bill in the House, then you had to work with the Senate. And that's where the compromise comes in. But you started and you stood on principle, and then did what you could to get the legislation passed. I don't call it being a statesman when you start from a compromising position.
You described him as preening statesman. It was a very derogatory image, those who seek first to compromise. Does it make you angry when people do that?
Not angry. It just gives me more work to do to keep them from doing that.
So you don't think that compromise is necessary to go through a long process of refining legislation and taking into consideration what everybody might want?
No. That's where compromise comes in. But my point is, and I hope my point was in the speech, is that it's where you start that's important. If you start from principle and then you start compromising to get the legislation done, then your principle, 9 times out of 10, will win out. You won't have to change it much. But if you start with compromising with yourself and start from a compromising position, by the time you get to passage and to the president's desk, it's probably a pretty lousy piece of legislation.